right, ladies and gentlemen, fellow board members, welcome to our board meeting this morning. I'd like to get it started if I can. I'm Mayor Walker. And as you all know, this is my last board meeting as the league president.
Smile on your face.
I got here quite early, but as Molly pointed out, it was because I like to hang out with the staff and had nothing to do with being excited to be done with. No, I'm just kidding. It's been a great week. So we've got a quorum together. Item number 2 on our agenda is a review and approval of the minutes and call for our conflict of interest disclosure. So for action, is there a motion on the minutes?
Second.
All right, we got Jessica on the motion, Dan on the second to approve our prior meeting minutes. Any further discussion on that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? All right, those meeting minutes are approved unanimously. Then the ULCT conflict of interest form, is that just something we need to make sure we have?
Every meeting we check, make sure we've got it in.
Okay, you haven't got it in. I'm using my city one. Hopefully that's enough. I think you can use your own ones you do for your cities, so you don't have to recreate it, but make sure you have your current one in, or the one for S2026. Since we've turned it in already for last.
Yep, and then we'll ask for a new round of them next month.
Okay.
When the new board officially starts.
Okay, all right. All right, item number 3 is our boards and commission reports and appointments. Alexa, you're gonna take that one, so go ahead.
And Alexis handed it over here to me. The only board and committee appointment we have is our ULCT Credentials Committee. And you can see language from our bylaws there as to what the Credentials Committee does. A bit of a holdover from when conventions were really convention-y, but this is our staff working at the table, signing everyone in and handing them their voting cards. So we do need the board to officially adopt that. We have co-chairs of Carson and Alexa, and Molly, Justin, and Cassidy will be assisting them as well. They will give a credential report to our parliamentarian, which is General Counsel Roger too, during the business session of the annual convention. And that'll let us know who's all there to vote when we vote in our new board. We do not have any resolutions this year, but they would also be voting on resolutions in that meeting as well.
So the committee this year is just going to be voting in new board members and second vice president. That's what your credential will be used for at this upcoming convention, which is tomorrow, if you forgot. Okay. So I guess we did a motion to approve the credentials committee.
So moved.
All right,
Second.
Lucy,
Second.
Mayor Shepherd, second to approve the credentials 2025 ULC Credentials Committee roster. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? All right, that passes unanimously as well. Item number 4, our engagement report, and it looks like Molly Wheeler is going to handle that. Is that right, Molly?
Absolutely, yeah.
Go ahead.
So as you said, annuals tomorrow. It's gonna be a party. To start with, really quickly, before we do that, I want to highlight that everyone in the room, and we'll have one as well for everyone online. We have our board gifts for the year as a thank you for your service and hanging out with us. In there, you'll find some good Utah treats, but you'll also find the book, one of the books from our keynote at the annual Rick Atkinson, who is a pretty well-renowned U.S. historian. So we're excited to have him talk about his kind of insights from the Revolutionary War and parallels today, as we kind of also are navigating a bit of a tumultuous time nationally. As far as annual goes, we're really excited. We have about 500 people registered. It's a little dip from annual in the past, but two reasons for that. One, we usually see a dip in the election years. Folks who aren't running again don't typically register to attend. And then in the past, we've paired our annual convention with the Recorders annual convention. And this year, the Recorders decided to do their own thing. So in the past, their numbers were included with our numbers. This year, they're not there, but we're still really excited and think it's going to be a great time. Some programming to highlight for you in addition to Rick. On Wednesday, we'll have the Taylor Service Award with Jenny Taylor, which we always look forward to. We'll have a panel discussion with Mayor Leffernan and Silvestrini, and Justin, who both have the insight of incorporating new communities, being the mayors of those communities, and now are not seeking re-election. So kind of their reflections on that. which we're excited about. A change this year, normally at the end of Wednesday, we do a big caucus block. And we've gotten various feedback about caucuses over the years, so we're trying two new things with that. One, we're actually gonna have caucuses scattered throughout the day. So during each workshop block, there will be a caucus, if you choose to attend. And then we also have Laura Hansen from the state coming to talk about the state housing plan for a part of the caucus, and then the other part of the caucus will be a bit more kind of free form discussion. Which again, we're kind of excited to try out. Would love your feedback, candid feedback at how that works at the end as we experiment with that. Exhibit hall will be good. Want to flag potentially the most important thing, not the most important thing, but pretty important, is that Best Friends Animal Society will be having I forget the exact term, but essentially a cuddle station of cats and dogs in the exhibit hall for attendees. So it is important,
And
right?
I'm just gonna note, if you say you're going to the cuddle station, just make sure it sounds like there's animals there.
I'll cuddle you.
Amazing. Another note we're making this year, in the past, we've always had a rural track for the past few years. We've gotten feedback, from a lot of our rural communities that kind of everyone just goes if they feel like it's an interesting topic. So this year we are going to ask that if you are not attendees, if they are not actually from rural communities, to not go to those workshops, so that the folks that we have from those rural communities are able to make the most of them. We've had some issues in the past where people from big cities kind of go and then just kind of take over the rural events. So that is a pivot this year that we are trying. And then on Wednesday evening, we're going to be having a bit of a carnival for attendees and their families in the exhibit hall with the Megan Moonshine Trio, some fun carnival games, cotton candy, sculptures, a bunch of fun stuff that we're looking forward to. Thursday's our Partners in Planning Day, as per usual, with WFRC and MAG. They'll be rolling out their centers and missing middle programming. We'll have workshops, we'll have our business session. So we're excited for that. Rolling into Friday, we have our first kind of full day conference or semi-conference for conflict competence as a potential add-on for folks. We're really excited for it. We have about 105 people signed up for that, which is really awesome. One thing I wanted to flag for the board, I was able to hold a couple seats. So if you did not register and want to attend on Friday, let me know and we can get you in, but I would need to know like today to make sure that we can save you that spot. Cam, is there anything else you want to add on annual or conflict competence?
Couple of things. First of all, thank you everybody for joining us to the board meeting, both in person and online for the last board meeting of this current board. A couple of things annual related for the next couple of days. Number one, we have enhanced security at the event, and Councilor Dugan, I want to thank Salt Lake City PD. We have been in touch with Chief Red, and there's been enhanced safety threats in Salt Lake City around elected officials. And so in consultation with Chief Red, we have enhanced security. So we will have several uniformed security personnel inside the Salt Palace at our event the whole time. So it's the first time we've done that, but in consultation with Chief Red, we thought that was the best approach. And unfortunately, as we've talked to other state leagues around the country, that's becoming more commonplace. So just wanted to give you the heads up there. And then Salt Lake City PD will have enhanced patrols outside the building, and they're setting up additional cameras and other things outside the building while we do enhanced security inside the building. So super unfortunate piece, but it's also unfortunately where we're at.
And do we pay for that?
Yes, yeah. So we've added that to our budget. That's just been in the last few days. So second piece, Molly mentioned the caucuses based on feedback from a lot of board members. We've made a modification to how we're doing the caucuses. The caucuses will be throughout the footprint. So rather than everybody going to caucus at the same time, they're throughout the footprint of the event. We'll have the governor's office joining us for them. And then Justin and I plan to be at all of them. So whereas in years past, when they're all at the same time, I go to one and then the other caucuses have different established board members. We will have Justin be planning to be at all of them to have that discussion. I'm going to preempt the question from my right about the name of a certain caucus.
Oh, it's featuring in my speech.
We didn't want to get in front of you and take that moment away, so I recognize what'll be part of my performance evaluation next year. As when you're lead president,
I did note that that particular caucus is right before my speaking opportunity.
that may have been intentional. And then I've had a couple people said, hey, the 2-day conference, so what's this Friday thing about? And it is a 2-day conference, and we made that strategic decision, 2-day. And what we felt with Conflict Conference is we wanted to try out having an optional opportunity on a day that used to be a conference day. It's separate from the convention, it's optional, and it's a deep dive on one topic. And so the fact that over 100 people have signed up for it, I think is really encouraging. We'll be there. And thank you to Molly for all the efforts. And again, the tragic sign of the times is that I think that training session is more needed today than ever before. We'll be thanking our retiring electeds during the course of the conference as well. And we'll be losing a lot of really good people this year. And those are the people we know who are retiring, not to mention many in this room who are running for re-election. And we wish you all the next few weeks. Mayor?
If I could, on that note, Mayor Silvestrina, you're on the Zoom call, right?
Yes, I am.
Well, if I could just take a little presidential privilege for just a minute. I just want to say to you, Jeff, having worked with you, both as a fellow mayor, but having you worked on our board as a past president, I think your contributions in your time as mayor and the formation of your city, and then all that you've been able to do, just speaks to your integrity, your skill level, your commitment to your community. You brought us so much to our board, as just being you and what your calmness in the storm, if you will. And I just want you to know, I personally appreciate you as much as anybody I've worked with ever in politics. You are a good example of what a level-headed politician should be. I need to learn more of that from you. But you really have been exemplary in all that you've done, not only just in your own community, but as examples and as colleagues to all of us on this board. Personally, I just want to tell you, thank you for your service. I know everyone here feels the same. You're a tremendous man, tremendous mayor. We wish you the absolute best going forward in your life.
Here, here.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. It's bittersweet. I'm going to miss this and all of you. The best thing about this job really has been all the people I've been able to meet and work with. And I am so impressed with the people in local government in our state. Our residents don't know how lucky they are, but I'll miss it. But this is a matter of priorities in my life for me, and so I feel like I've set my city on a good path, and 9 years is a good long time. Maybe a lot of politicians should consider not serving longer than that anyway. But anyway, I appreciate it, guys. I love you all, and I'll miss you, but I won't miss you. So thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. All right.
Thank you. Justin, do you want to take one last moment on caucuses, then Molly will come back to you for NLC?
Yeah, so the 5 of you who have agreed to help us facilitate the caucuses, you can just hang out after the meeting for like 2 minutes, and we can coordinate really quick on what that looks like. We should be good to go. Shouldn't be too hard. Y'all be good at it, but it'll be good to coordinate really quick.
Excellent. 2 points. I also realized I got so excited about annual, talked through part of your gift and then skipped over the rest. So 1, there was a book of the keynote speaker. We also have Redmond salt in there. So some just good Utah trees, some local honey, and then some ritual chocolate, which is based up in Heber. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah. Then also want to pivot, annual, it's going to be great. Conflict Confidence, going to be great. And then in case you're like feeling a bit bummed that there are, that was the great event. Fear not, NLC City Summit. Oh,
So just a quick reminder, the business session is Thursday at lunch. And after the announcement is made for next year's board, we'll come up to the stage so we can do a board photo. And later in this meeting, we will ask this board to approve the timing of the next meeting. And then we'll give the tentative dates. We have to wait till the next board meets in October to set the whole calendar, but you at least have it in front of you of what we're planning on after going through calendars with soon to be President Bradshaw. But just make sure you stay on the stage afterwards so we can get that board photo for whoever is continuing next year.
One other business thing for animals, sorry, I'm just, too many fun things. QR code for parking. The QR code is what you scan at the kiosk for parking. You do not scan the code with your phone. It will take you to a nonsense website that does not exist. So you scan the actual QR code itself. This is the parking.
Should be in your know before you go email,
Email.
as well as in this packet,
Packet.
and the hard copies we'll be passing out. So we'll have a few options for you to use that. If you can't get it to work as you're coming in, just grab a ticket, and then on your way out, you'll be able to use a QR code to get out.
Perfect. Okay.
And I'll-
Anything else with Andy?
Nope.
All right, great, perfect. So NLC City Summit coming to Salt Lake this November. This is the first time in a couple of decades that it has been in Salt Lake and likely will be again. So it's an incredible opportunity to take advantage of. It's also helpful. NLC offers some really great rates for the host communities that we've been able to work on. So normally, if you wanted to attend NLC City Summit, registration would probably run you anywhere from $1,000 to $1,500. There are prorated Utah rates if you want to attend the full conference. That runs from about $550 to $750. But there's also a one-day rate for Utahns if you want to go. That's $125. So it's a really cool opportunity to take advantage of, get a feel for NLC. We've worked to get Tim Schreiber there as a keynote on Friday. Friday night will also be our state night, which we're really excited and looking forward to. So definitely would encourage you all to check out NLC City Summit. Salt Lake's been working really hard. We've been working with their team. We're excited. Yeah.
So in terms of the schedule, for those of us that are trying to save our few dollars
Yes.
for the one day, you know, to get the sessions that would be most pertinent for our community
Yeah.
leaders. Is there a schedule so we can say this day would be more beneficial than that day?
You know what?
Okay.
There is, it's online.
Yeah, there is. And is it fully?
Because
It's fully on there.
I looked, but it's been a minute ago, and it had the different courses, but it didn't say what day they would be.
Yeah, there's a whole detailed calendar now.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So check that out. And then I will say a little spoiler secret is that the one-day rate works for any day of the conference. So if you do find that like all of the programming for Manti is on Thursday, you can use that rate. NLC prefers folks go on Friday. We have our state night on Friday and some other kind of Utah programming that we're focusing on. So we'd love people who are going to do the one-day rate to be there on Friday. But if you are looking and it's like Thursday is the day for us, you can also use that one-day rate then.
Thanks.
Then I'll add, you'll see the bullet point that there's no league board meeting in November. And that was in consultation with the officers, recognizing that NLC conference is a week-long conference. And so you combine the fact that our conference is late, it's September 30th. The board meeting will be October 27th, the league board meeting October 27th, and then we'll meet again in early December. Felt like rather than trying to squeeze in a third board meeting in a 7-week span, we cancel the board meeting and urge you to attend the NLC event. We'll still do an officer check-in. We have LPC that week. You'll have plenty of chances to see us, but we wanted to prioritize the time of interacting with your city colleagues from around the country. The officers will do a check-in that week. Molly mentioned the state night. We've rented out a facility that I'll reference from the stage during the State of the League remarks on Thursday. And the goal of that state night is to bring together a final farewell for those who are leaving office, because the election is 2 weeks before. A welcome to newly electeds. So we're holding space so that we can do a big push to newly elected so they can interact with folks, as well as those who are ongoing. So we're hoping it can be a big splash, and that even if people don't go to NLC during the day, we can still get them to come to that state night and introduce themselves to their city colleagues that Friday night. So we have not been promoting this heavily because of our own convention, but starting Friday of this week, we will start promoting this heavily. We also plan to do a large city caucus meeting during the footprint of that conference. Again, trying to maximize, if we're asking you, Mayor Nadolski, for example, to dedicate this time for NLC, then let's make sure we're coordinating as much as possible and being as efficient as possible. So that'll be a big week because it's also legislative interims and LPC, and I'm hosting a bunch of Western League directors for a strategic retreat at the beginning of that week too. So that'll be a busy week.
That's a wild group.
It is.
I've been to that little Cox meeting.
Yeah. It is.
Those folks they're Western to be sure.
Indeed.
West.
Indeed. Molly, anything else engagement wise?
Not that I can think of.
Great.
Okay, that gets us, we've gone over the agenda and everybody's got the packet with your parking, so don't take your butt folder with you. Next item is 5, which is our advocacy report. So there's a lot of reports that need to be advocated. Go ahead. So,
That is true. We have brought a lot back to the group today. For direction, we are at a key pivot point on several big issues. The first one I'll turn to Jared to discuss, and that's an amicus request from Salt Lake City. And Jared, I'll let you talk through our amicus process, because most people on this board have actually not been through our amicus process. It's been a few years. So Jared, we'll start with you.
Yeah, it's really sad. I just,
yeah,
You
get
know,
rid of that name
I,
placard.
I shaved my head.
Seth
so,
is right there. I see him.
Seth, we're messing with your name placard.
It's a good looking one with that Cosmo Cougar.
Leave it alone.
Alrighty, so thanks, Cam. On occasion, we have different members of the league come and request the league's support in some type of litigation, whether it be an answer, whether it be a brief. And so with that, last year, I think at the beginning of the year, the board approved a amicus policy. I'll get into that in just a minute. But the 2 cities that have requested the league's participation, and participating meaning signing on to a amicus brief, which is like a document that you send in for support of those that are parties to the case. Both Moab and Salt Lake City have cases that are very similar in nature and have the same identical legal issues that are at play. They are, for lack of a better term, they're emotionally difficult cases. And in both cases, there was a domestic dispute between, one was a fiance, one was an ex-husband. The police responded, and both women were eventually murdered by their ex-husband and fiance. Both parties sued the city for negligent police response, and all of that is in these in the documents that you've received, and it's a lot. So I would be surprised if you maybe Troy here got through all of it, but so that's where we're at. The district court dismissed it because of the Governmental Immunity Act, based on wrongful death claims. And what is being challenged and what's been appealed is whether or not the Governmental Immunity Act should remain, and whether there's a legal argument to be made that wrongful death essentially should not be recognized under the Governmental Immunity Act. So that's where both cities sit. Moab requested our support through signing on to the amicus brief that Kearns filed in the Moab case. And because of timing, and when we have our board meeting and the court's request of when the amicus brief needed to be filed, we weren't able to go through our amicus process, because ultimately the board decides whether the league will support in whatever way it chooses. And so that's right now it's in front of the Supreme Court. And Salt Lake City, on the other hand, is in a place and has begun the process of requesting the league's support and sign on of the same brief, essentially, that Kearns filed. In the Moab case, with the Kearns amicus brief, the Utah Local Governments Trust signed on, Utah Association of Counties, Utah County Indemnity Pool, Utah Chiefs of Police Association, Utah Association of Special District, the Fire Chiefs, and Salt Lake City, all signed on to the Kearns amicus brief. What is being requested here is that the league essentially make or have a small section added to that Kearns brief and in support and perspective of the member cities at large. And so the amicus procedure right now is that that request be made. Now the request is actually quite a few documents that they have to submit, and Salt Lake City has done that, and that is all in the packet that you've received. And which goes over the briefing in the case, what the district court decided. It's got the Kearns amicus brief involved in that packet. It's got both cases essentially in the briefing that's been filed, so that that's at your disposal. Ultimately, typically in each of these amicus or litigation participation requests, there will be a few that are consulted with. The executive director will consult with various individuals, attorneys that might come from the Utah Municipal Attorneys Association, that Roger and myself, along with others, that essentially develop a recommendation to the board. And that recommendation, the decision to join or not, will need to be in the next board meeting that we have in October. The filing has to be done in November, so that would be that would be the next board meeting before it would need to be filed. And so this is not necessarily the discussion, but it's a preliminary to give you that information so that between now and then you can read that, you can have that at your disposal, and come prepared for thoughts, questions, and really also at this board meeting, if you've got any questions, we're happy to go over those and answer those. But I know it was a hefty packet, I think 300 pages. So, yes.
I got 3 questions.
Okay.
First question, the wrongful death action of getting bootstrapped up through this theory of negligent police response.
Correct.
So what did the court do on the negligent police response?
Well, right now it
I
was,
can't believe there's a definition for that, but okay.
well, so it was dismissed before anything on the merits happened because of the Utah government.
So that concept was not,
No,
discussed.
that will go back down. It was just merely whether that should be
governmental
dismissed.
meaning, okay, so that's.
So that's really the legal issue at hand at the Supreme Court on both cases.
And then second question, how effective, I'm not an appellate lawyer, it's not my thing, but how effective or persuasive or important is an amicus brief to an issue like this with the Supreme Court? Is there any, I'm just asking.
To the extent that we can provide additional perspective, from a city perspective, globally, from all the cities in Utah, that would be helpful for the court. I've seen amicus briefs, particularly in the camping ordinance grants pass, where Justice Gorsuch used it, I mean, extensively, the amicus brief filed by, I believe it was NLC, the league, and used that extensively to come to a decision. Now, what they're going to do with this one, there are a lot of parties that have already signed on to the Moab case. So there's a lot of different perspectives already being representative, if you will. But it's from their own perspective, the fire chiefs coming from their own perspective, the UAC with the counties coming with their own perspective. So this, I mean, ultimately, what is the outcome if it is defined that the Governmental Immunity Act does not cover wrongful death when it comes to, I mean, in these cases, the factual cases are that there was a domestic dispute, and because of that, it ended up in this death that happened. So I don't know what the court is going to do, whether it's going to strictly construe that to be to those facts when there's a domestic dispute and when there's a death that happens because of a police response. So I don't know what they'll conclude. There is strong precedent in the past that is trying to be overturned. So that's where we're at, is there is a seminal case that has said that, look, this wrongful death immunity should remain and should stay. And so there is solid precedent in the past, from courts in the past, and this is an effort to overturn that and say that the court either the court it doesn't apply here, or it should be overturned altogether because it's not legally based.
Again, then my third question would be, if as a league, our perspective, I apologize, I haven't read this current brief, but if we were to sign on to this amicus brief, I guess the Kearns brief is the one.
It is.
The argument is essentially, we're saying collectively as cities, listen, if wrongful death, if the wrongful death statute gets interpreted so that we're exposed, that is a significant financial burden for our taxpayers to have to deal with every case, and ultimately, in both these cases, the person who murdered the person is the person who murdered the person.
Right.
And it looks like they're trying to trying to lay some blame on the cities for either not incarcerating them or whatever they did. But at the end of the day, I mean, I fundamentally have a problem with that from a legal perspective, because the person who did it is the person who did it. To me, it seems like, so our position, what they're asking for is that we as a collective group say, yeah, this governmental immunity on wrongful death, it's good, we need it, because if you're gonna open it up, it'll, the flames would be devastating, I guess. Is that,
well, and not even certainly the financial part of it, open to the liability claims, but also operationally, how is your police department going to respond to everything that every claim that very well could end up in a violent situation? What if you were the police chief? What would you do? You would say incarcerated. Doesn't matter.
Which then
doesn't matter.
We're gonna Fifth Amendment
and
decisions that could,
right.
it can spiral into a bunch of problems.
Operationally, it's.
But the only issue the court's deciding is whether governmental immunity should apply in the wrongful death case.
Yes.
All those other, how the police did it or whether they were negligent, that's not what the court's gonna decide. Okay. All right.
On appeal, yes.
Do you want discussion from the group about what we think?
Maybe just all looking for these types of just preliminary questions, because we're gonna come back next month with the recommendation for you to consider. But
Anybody else have any other questions?
No, that was good questions.
I don't have any questions, just a comment. These are tragic and horrible, but I agree with the conversation that's been had in terms of the governmental immunity as we weigh everything that we have to do in the space of police work. I've had my police chiefs tell me as they've served, for 6 years that they're hanging it up in their 7th year just because they have lived with the weight of trying to control everything in the city and yet have no ability to control anything in the city. And to be able to predict what somebody's going to do and know exactly how somebody's going to act is so impossible. And to erode the Governmental Immunity Act would have such a detrimental effect on everything that our police and or the cities have to do. While these cases are as tragic as they come, the Governmental Immunity Act, I think, allows us to do our jobs more fully and completely. So we can't let it be eroded. Those are my thoughts.
One comment that I would like to make on this is this process was set up so we didn't have just a political process of who got approved or not approved for amicus. We had never had an amicus probably until 12, 13 years ago. And there have been times that we have said no because we didn't think the issue was that important, etc. But we formalized the process so the decision was somewhat devoid of politics and was on the basis of the legal merits. And that's why it's as formalized as it is.
Roger's spot on, and let me just add on just a little bit to what he said. I think that as you read through, as you consider in coming back as a member of the board to vote on one way or another, I think it's important to keep in mind that there will be, and there has been in the past, different requests for league support. And so I think that it's important to know why these issues or this case is one that the league should become involved in and sign on to know that if your city is involved in a lawsuit and you want the league to sign on, what are those parameters? And I should say this, that the amicus policy is actually in the packet for your consideration, and there are quite a few different considerations. They're requesting municipalities' current role and level of involvement in the litigation, the number of municipalities affected by the issue being litigated. And there's a extensive list in the amicus policy that is to be a guiding, directing document of how to differentiate essentially when the league becomes involved and when it does not become involved with litigation.
I have one more question, so I had 4, I guess. The Governmental Immunity Act is an act passed by our legislature.
Yes.
And the precedent case that you referred to has just been interpreting this Governmental Immunity Act that was some time ago. Is it the legislature has in its purview the ability to change the Governmental Immunity Act if they wanted to?
Yes. So I should say that this seminal case discusses what essentially they get back into when the state was founded, whether the Constitution, the Utah Constitution, would allow that governmental immunity to be in place for wrongful deaths. So it's not just a legislative exercise of, it's also constitutional.
So the legislature couldn't change the Governmental Immunity Act and negate the precedent? That's my question, I guess.
Yes, they could, yes.
Okay, all right, that's something to consider.
But the legal issues at hand involves the Utah Constitution and all that was involved in.
Is the legislature apprised of this claim on the Governmental Immunity Act? Do you know if there's any legislative?
I don't know if they're aware of this one in specific. There are other cases dealing with government immunity they are aware of this year, so.
Have we been asked to join in with the EMS issue we've been talking about? That's a threat to governmental, maybe, have we been asked to join in anything related to that?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. So not asked to join in anything as far as the courts go. We are coordinating a working group to look at that legislatively.
There's a pattern coming to Curtis.
Yeah, no, and that one is problematic. We're gonna work on that one. We've apprised a couple of legislators of that one, and they are I mean, this is a general statement that is true. They aren't happy with the courts generally, but they're all about happy with the courts on this issue, which is gonna be in our favor, I think.
Okay. Any other questions?
Motion to start the consideration process.
Consideration process.
So we need a motion to start our formal consideration process of joining this amicus briefing. Is there a motion?
moved.
Second. All right, Jessica, right? Who did it? No.
Kate.
Okay, Kate and Dan. Kate on the motion, Dan on the second. Any further discussion? All in favor of moving forward and evaluating this request under our policy, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, you have your approval unanimously, sir. Next item. Oh, this is gonna be fun. It's a state housing plan.
State housing plan. All right. What? Over the, right. Over the last few months, we've gathered a significant amount of data from our members about state housing plan. Nick, you can go ahead and click down to the ULCT housing survey results. I'll take a moment just to quickly frame it. The draft state housing plan is going to be out literally any minute. It shouldn't be a big surprise. Everything that we've said at LPC in the last couple of LPC meetings is what we've been told is likely going to be in that initial draft. We mentioned that we will have the governor's office staff join each caucus meeting over the next couple of days to talk about what the state housing plan means for different types of communities, because it means something a little different in Clearfield and Park City and in Harriman. And so we're looking forward to those discussions, and part of what we hope to accomplish over the next few minutes as a board here is to make sure we maximize our time the next 2 days with our members in the different conversation opportunities that we'll have. In particular, this board back in June encouraged us to look for a path forward on detached ADUs. And then we've spent a lot of time in what we've referred to as the MIHP 2.0. And I want to just take a moment, make sure we're all on the same page about why MIHP 2.0 has come up. And it's really two reasons. Reason number one is one of the state housing plan tactics we anticipate will be encouraging zoning changes, the state encouraging zoning changes through the use of state dollars. So that's one of the tactics we expect to be prioritized. The second piece, and this is a tribute, Mayor Walker, to your representative, Representative Cal Roberts, who will be on our stage Thursday morning, and you'll be interviewing him, is Representative Roberts is a former, well, interviewing / punching apparently. But Representative Cal Roberts is a former Draper City Council member. And he has been very, very collaborative in his approach. And Mayor Palmer, yesterday you and I were meeting about potential transit alignment and expansion in southern Salt Lake County, northern Utah County. Representative Roberts usually comes to those meetings. He was unable to come yesterday, but he has said repeatedly to me since he's taken this assignment, how can we get more infrastructure dollars to support local governments, really planning for growth and planning for housing? And that his idea of MIHP 2.0 is if cities are doing these things, then the state partners with those cities with additional infrastructure dollars. Now, those additional infrastructure dollars right now could fit into 4 different categories. And we've told Representative Roberts that at this point, we're in the all of the above camp, but it's a very tight budget year, so I don't know how these will ultimately get prioritized. We'll talk about that in a moment. But the 4 buckets that have been discussed have been transit expansion, system improvements. And so when I say system improvements, we're talking about water tanks, we're talking about sewer lift stations, the types of infrastructure investments that benefit the entire system, not necessarily just an individual project. Because of the state helping on system improvements. What he's referred to as the Class B and C fund, but it's more maintenance money for cities, for roads in particular, and then technical assistance, particularly for smaller communities on the edge of the urban areas that are just overwhelmed, and it's easier for them to say no. It's harder to say yes because of the infrastructure challenges and lack of in-house bandwidth to figure out how to navigate these proposals. So right now, those are all the different ideas that are in that financial bucket. And MHP 2.0 would be the trigger. Now, if Representative Roberts were here, he would tell you that his focus is on affordable homeownership and starter homes in particular. His co-chair, Senator Lincoln Fillmore, would say the same thing. Senator Fillmore is a little more aggressive than Representative Roberts. And he's publicly stated his preference of either having the state just mandate density bonuses, that if a developer met certain starter home requirements in a proposal, then the state would automatically grant a density bonus. And he's also referenced the idea of withholding gas tax money from cities, whereas Representative Roberts has been more additive. Now, the good news, I think, for both of them is they both said, like, we're all trying to get to the same place here, which is how do you get units that are entitled actually built? And to Senator Fillmore's credit, he said to us after the CHOB meeting a couple of weeks ago, he's like, I think we're in alignment on 80% of the things. So let's focus on the 80% now, which is where MHP 2.0 comes into play. Meanwhile, in our conversations with the builders, their focus is really on project approval. They actually have said publicly, they want to give credit to cities that are approving projects that meet these objectives. And they said, if a city does X, then give them credit for MHP, have them be in compliance, let's partner there. So they've been more collaborative maybe than what we've seen in the past. So that's the framing for those who haven't been up to speed, like, why are we talking about MHP 2.0? It's that framing. Now, MHP 1.0 is all focused on planning, and most of the discussion on MHP 2.0 has been focused more on the actual land use action, the zoning action, the development agreement, the action that the city takes. And when we surveyed LPC a couple of weeks ago, we built out a tentative 2.0 list based on feedback we've been receiving from our advisory committee all summer, and the big differences between the status quo of MHP and MHP 2.0 are as follows. Number one, more emphasis on centers and tactics cities are doing around centers. Number two, the MHP 2.0 list that we circulated for feedback included some tactics around permanent supportive housing and deeply affordable, so that end of the spectrum. And that was in part based on feedback we'd received from some cities who had said, we have approved permanent supportive housing or deeply affordable housing, and we can't really get credit for it under the current MIHP. And that is a gap in the current MIHP process. Number three was the zoning emphasis rather than plan emphasis. Number four was an emphasis around ownership and affordable home ownership, which we started into with changes to MIHP last year. And then number five is the objective data and seeing which tactics are resulting in outcomes, recognizing that cities can't control market forces and there's a lot that's outside of our control. Okay, so with all that being said, for the framing, are there any questions about that before we pivot to show you the results of what we've seen thus far? Any questions on the framing? Councilor
Well, can you remind me when the senator and representative are talking about starter homes, what is their minimum price?
In Park City, it's 5 million.
I mean, do they have that to recognize it?
This has
I know
been,
we're in a novel, but we are dealing with a lot of that right now. So.
well, it's not just you. So we had a really important after meeting after the most recent CHA. One of our CHA reps, South Torrance Councilor Don Shelton, participated in that after meeting with Carson and me, where we had a builder with us as well, where they fully acknowledged that the Wasatch Back is a fundamentally different market. When I say that, I'm including the builder. It's a fundamentally different market than the Wasatch Front. And we were talking about Park City and Heber, which are two different markets, but are still fundamentally different than the Wasatch Front. So along the Wasatch Front and the other urban areas, so Cache Valley, Washington County, the focus really has been on the $450,000 number that the governor identified in his starter home definition. But with a huge caveat and acknowledgement that that number doesn't work on the Wasatch back. And that even 450,000 is hard for people to reach. And depending on your zip code on the Wasatch Front in Washington County and in Cache Valley, 450 may not actually be a starter home. So hopefully that answers your question. That, like, I think there's a greater acknowledgement at the Capitol now that there's not one definition to rule them all, but that also complicates trying to build out a 2.0 because your market is so different. And even, I'll use Ogden as an example. Ogden has multiple submarkets within Ogden City. And so starter homes look different depending where you are in the same city. And that's complicated.
And when they say starter home, is the definition that can be a condo?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. In fact, that's.
So it just is like a.
Yeah,
relative,
yep.
like-
In fact, that was a huge push from us last year.
Yeah.
That I think has changed some perspectives at the Capitol. Like a starter home does not just look one way. A starter home will look different depending where you are and includes your.
Are they thinking of the cost of HOA? And when you're getting into, our HOA costs are just pretty astronomical, and so that's been a little bit of a barrier of getting people into some starter homes too, when all of a sudden their HOAs are like $700 a month. They started at 150 or 200. So I don't know if that's ever been a topic, but we're running into that. And a lot of that is also coming from places are not getting insurance because of fire risk.
Yeah.
So there's like a whole bunch of headaches in there, but but I just wanted to make sure HOA cost is something that people are thinking about because it can change your home price very quickly.
So both HOA and WUI have come up in the housing plan conversations. Interestingly, Mayor Nadolski hosted a fantastic meeting last Thursday morning. The entire legislative delegation was either in person or online for an hour-and-a-half discussion with the city council, the mayor, police chief, fire chief, league staff. I mean, it was an awesome hour-and-a-half deep dive discussion. And Speaker Schultz opened his remarks by saying the number one priority for the House of Representatives is cost of living. And then he immediately jumped to property tax, which we'll come to later in the meeting. But I would add HOA and WUI insurance costs as part of that cost of living piece, because they've come up in the state housing plan and in discussions with legislators. In fact, the legislature created a position that the person was just hired and started this month as the HOA ombudsman at the state to try to navigate HOA challenges. And that's one piece that they're looking at is those HOA costs. With the WUI piece, that's a bigger conversation than today, but last year the legislature made some changes to WUI. John Pike, formerly president, current commissioner of insurance, has met with us several times on this because you've had insurance carriers pull out of California and other states that have high WUIs. And I don't need, as I'm looking around the room, if the cities that have had recent WUI fires, like you've lived it, right? And it's complicated, but it adds to those expenses. So, but this is in part why we broke caucuses up tomorrow, so that the housing plan reps can go to each caucus. And I encourage you to bring this up specifically in the caucus meeting tomorrow. Okay, so Nick has pulled up the memo.
I have a framing question, and
Frame away.
if it is something that you're going to discuss with those helping chair caucuses that can hold, but our caucuses are a unique opportunity for the members to share their feelings. And some of the ways the state has shared their goals and objectives in the past have not gone over well. So I'm curious with this framing of the state housing plan and MIHP 2.0, what are the directives or suggestions or partnership messaging that has been shared with our state counterparts so that we know what's the way they're going to kick off these caucuses, so that those of us that are helping manage discussions and feelings and do the emotional work necessary to do that in advance.
I think it's a great question, and those of you who are at the governor's mansion in May, I'm sure share the frustration that Councilmember Bradshaw diplomatically described.
Or the frustration of not being included because he doesn't include the decision makers, but whatever.
I had to give you the chance to get the rest of it up.
I told you there would be time necessary.
I agree.
To manage the feelings.
What we have encouraged the governor's team that will be joining us will be Laura Hanson and Tara Anderson. And Tara is actually a city council member in Harriman. So I think that in and of itself will help. And then I've had several
So Mayor
conversations.
Palmer has an extra assignment.
Yeah, the conversations that we've had with Laura and Tara is that we don't want to have a presentation on the housing plan. I think everybody in our membership is generally aware that there's a housing plan out there. We wanted the focus to be more on the listening and two-way communication. And so I can reiterate that to both of them this afternoon, but they both are prepared for constructive criticism, and they're prepared to listen and have a conversation rather than do a presentation.
Oh, good. I will be less emotional preparing.
Okay.
Just to add, sorry, first, so Salt Lake City met with Steve Walter
Yes, yeah. about the rentals.
last week about the rental side of the house,
Yeah.
so it's kind of outside of the stream, but part of our discussion with him was, this is on building new homes. Part of our discussion was on keeping people in their homes and not putting them on that other side of the fence, like, oh, now we gotta find a place for them to live, and they'll never find a place. So our discussion was narrowly focused on that side of the house and the absence of that in this broader plan. And so you may see some words from Salt Lake City on that in some form or fashion.
How was it received?
It was pretty good with Steve. Yeah, he was understanding, but it was also like, okay, we'll put it in the top 15, but we may not get there. So it was well received, but not sure how we'll go past that conversation.
Well,
That kind of came probably also as an inside track in other conversations.
Well, and Sue called me right after you finished your conversation, and as a reminder, we started with 170 tactics, and I want to thank Mayor Palmer, Councilmember Dugan, and others who were in these different work groups. I don't have the list of all of our city folks who were in these work groups, but we started with 170 tactics. That got narrowed down to about 45, and then we're waiting for the final list of prioritized tactics from within that 45, right? And part of the reason in our survey, we were surveying around permanent supportive housing, was an acknowledgement that as the new homeless resource center complex and campus comes online, that's going to have ripple effects through the entire homelessness and lower income housing spectrum. What does that mean is still an open question, but it's going to have ripple effects. And coming back to the Ogden meeting last Thursday, that probably consumed, would you say, Mayor Nadolski, a third of the meeting was, homelessness is the right term, but just lower income housing, which is, if you think about the spectrum of housing, yeah, most of the discussion really is focused on starter homes and up, as opposed to starter homes and down on the spectrum. And it's fair to say like a third of your meeting was really starter home and down.
And it's had a lot to do with the concentration of it.
Yeah.
It's hard to manage the concentration if, and it's unhealthy for communities if we concentrate wealth and poverty. So that took up a big part of it.
Yeah, but it was a terrific discussion. So perfect example of the Faces and Places initiative of getting legislative faces into your city places. It was a really robust hour and a half substantive discussion. It was not just how are the kids? It was
good.
It was meat and potatoes. Okay, so the survey results to date are 50 individual responses from 41 cities. Nick, can you scan down to just
The tables.
stop here for a second. So the members in general felt would be the most impactful in MIHP 2.0 were these 5: zoning for lot sizes for lots smaller than 6,000 square feet, lots that allow 2 housing types in single family zone or commercial zone for mansion style multiplexes that look like single family detached. This is often known as the daybreak model or missing middle, zoned for townhomes in certain portions of the city, and then allow for detached accessory dwelling units. I want to thank Carson. He's been crunching the data significantly on this. And if you go down to the next, next piece, those are the general results. So then Carson started breaking it down by different classifications of cities, because I was surprised when he initially presented this data to us at the end of last week, that there were no center type tactics that scored in the top 5. Well, as Carson pointed out, that as this survey right now has 41 cities. And so depending who's filled out the survey, you're going to get slightly different results. So if you pull out the smaller cities, so cities of 4th class and smaller, and just look at cities of the 3rd class and bigger, you saw the center related tactics shoot up. And pretty significantly so, right, Carson?
Yeah, I think we saw a much higher distribution moving into the majority of larger city respondents saying that these strategies would have a medium or high impact versus the smaller cities, the majority saying they would have a low impact. Obviously, if you're a community without any transit capacity or any transit capacity in the near future, then you're going to say that won't have much of an effect on you. The other piece I wanted to mention is this was all framed within the moderate housing plan context. And the definition of moderate income housing in state code has fluctuated almost every year. So I think many respondents were looking at it at the lens of moderate income housing, not necessarily the full housing spectrum. So I think that's part of the reason that you see some of the other strategies moving down as well, like HTRZs provide a lot of supply, but it's typically high-end units, and then the deed restricted lower end, deeply affordable units. So I think that kind of explains the context as well.
Perfect.
Can I ask another question of Carson? So just below this part of the memo is the actual raw survey data. And
Nick, will you scan down to that, because we're gonna walk through.
one of the things I thought was interesting as I was taking it, and then again last night when I was reading through the board packet, was I remember taking it and thinking, what do you mean by impact level? Impact to my city, impact on moving on housing, impact on cost, and so I think I did what I do when I am usually confused by a survey, and I'm like, middle for everything. Anyway, so I was curious as we were going through this, because I did find the small city, big city, difference on what worked and what didn't work. I found that to be really interesting and good food for thought for our discussion. I found the impact to be less helpful because of what I remember thinking as I was taking it and unsure what I was supposed to be gauging the impact of.
Yeah, that's a terrific question, Councilmember. We sort of use that term because that could encompass so many different things, right? And even now, I don't know, without the state housing plan actually being available yet, I don't think we actually have a clear target of what we need to do for housing or what success looks like. We have many different targets that we've had over the years, whether that's more deeply affordable housing where we know the greatest shortage is, whether it's starter homes where we have kind of identified the political need, whether it's more supply overall. We don't really have a clear goal of success. The reason that we use kind of that high level term impact, and it was undefined intentionally, is because we wanted to know, like, really, this is not a measure so much of what policy levers will work. I think that's a different question. This is a measure of what our membership feels like will change things, right? So impact, it could be bad or good. We left that open-ended and kind of open for interpretation. Really, we just wanted to know if these are included, what things people will think will move the needle either way, right? If you're a community without transit, you could say this will have no impact on my community because it can't even be built. You could be inferred as, if you're a community who really likes transit-oriented development, you could say this will have an impact for us because we can utilize it more. So that was sort of the goal, is not to like create any like or not to impose any kind of like moral judgment on whether these things are good or bad, just to say, like, do our members think there will be a change from this or not? Which, and again, like, there's no perfect way to write a question, so I'm always, as soon as I write them and field them, I always have some second guesses, but I think that was our rationale for going into this.
So next week, we've got meeting with Representative Roberts and Senator Fillmore and others, because they want to prioritize which tactics make the most sense to form the MHP 2.0 for additional infrastructure dollars. We as staff have some interesting takeaways from the survey thus far, and one objective we have over the next few days is to share which cities have filled this out and which cities have not, to give everybody one last chance to fill it out if your city hasn't done it. But before we tell you what our takeaways are, we wanted to open up for discussion. Are there any survey results that jumped out to you that you'd like to discuss further? Are there survey results that surprised you? Are there survey results that made sense to you? Like, this is our chance to give you feedback. Is we have caucus meetings the next 2 days. We also have our LPC advisory meeting tomorrow. So we'll have chances for deeper dives. Like even Councilmember Bratcher, your question, that could be a deeper dive in our LPC advisory group tomorrow at lunch. So open to thoughts about the results as you see them before we tell you what our takeaways were.
I was surprised at the amount of red that we would not do this. It just blatantly, I mean, in multiple questions of, no, we're not doing that. No, we wouldn't do that. No, we wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
That concerns me.
Yeah.
Because if that information were to get out and we were to show that to a legislature of cities saying, no, we won't. I mean, they just finally approved, UHC did the condo stuff on Friday, and released it. And we have cities that wouldn't do it even if you asked them to. That doesn't bode very well for us.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up because I was surprised by the amount of red initially as well. And that's why I asked Carson, I'm surprised, particularly in the center space, how much red there was in the center space, right? Because that's a fundamentally different message than when I attend WFRC and MAG meetings. But then as I broke it down further, it's like, okay, well, there's a lot of communities that filled out the survey that aren't in the center ballgame because they're not in the metro area. So those numbers did flip a little bit, right? So we built this data out to get it in the packet for the entire results. And that is an excellent point where we're trying to do some follow-up. And I think, well, Carson, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add on that, Mayor, because I think that's a really important point. I do think that as Cam and I have talked a little bit about these results, one of the things that I've heard both in surveys and in talking to a lot of city officials is a sort of maybe a little bit of pessimism about how much these strategies or doing these for MIHP specifically are working. I hear again and again cities saying we've done this kind of zoning, we've tried to do these agreements. There's cities who are doing a lot of really hard and hitting the desk work, trying to figure out how to put together affordable housing overlays. And I think there's a lot of a sense in the membership that like, are we doing all of this without any success? Like, why do we keep trying to do this more and more if it's not working? I do think actually, ironically, the same, like we often hear MIHP isn't working now. If you read through the reports, there are a lot of success stories where cities have produced more supply, where cities have produced more affordable supply and done some really innovative things. But it does feel like a drop in the bucket, I think, to many of our members. So I think that is partly reflected in here. I do think when we looked at during the spring at the mid-year conference, we had some open-ended text questions about housing and how cities felt about housing and planning for housing. And one interesting thing we found in that was if you actually look at the spatial relativity of like housing and planning for land use, like there is a major gap in how cities think about those two things. And I think that's been driven by the fact that we've been for years like pedal to the metal on growth, a lot of tough city council meetings, and we're not seeing prices falling. So I think we need to work through MHP 2.0 and make sure part of this is messaging, but part of this is making sure we're collecting data that can tell a positive story, right? HTRZs, if you haven't read the HTRZ reports, or if you're not on the board or spent a lot of time with Cam talking about them, you would have no idea if they've been effective at all. I think they have a great success story with 50,000 some odd units planned already. Station area plans kind of the same example, but I think part of it's pessimism, part of it's just, I think we need to do a better job of telling like cities like, here's what has had success, because it doesn't probably feel like anything's having success.
So to see your hands up.
Yeah, as I'm looking at this data, there's something about it that's actually kind of encouraging. There is a lot of red, but in most cases, not all, but in most cases, there's a decent amount of likely or already implemented.
Mhm.
And as I look at this, I think, well, I'm not doing all of it. As a city, I'm not going to do all of these. I'm just going to do some of them. And I don't have to do all of them. And I don't think anybody expects me to do all of them. And so, although there is a lot of red, I think there's a lot of already done. And I think there's a lot of likely. And so, if I aggregate that out, and you maybe have the data that says Spanish Fork, I don't know if my staff has responded actually, but if hopefully we have. The Spanish Fork has done it. We said we have done these 2, and Draper has done these 3, and Bountiful has done these 2, and they probably don't all align. So that means across the state, maybe we're doing or likely to do a lot of these things, and that might be a really good story. That highlights our mantra of the one size misfits, but the multiple options creates, aggregated gains.
Yeah, great point, Seth. Other thoughts and observations about the data to date?
I think that's a really important point is why are they not likely to do it? If we had some written comments or if it is because they're already implementing and they don't have that need to do that, understanding the why, I think maybe giving a qualitative option for that would give us some better info. But I think Seth's onto something with maybe it is if they're already implementing a ton of stuff. It's not that they don't support that idea, it's just they're already doing a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, great point. Other observations of the data to date, and then I'll pivot to explain what we pulled away from it in addition to what's already been brought up.
Yeah, I'll say, I think it's the point about we need to tell our members success stories, right? The developer need to hear these too, the concerns, the disconnect between these two. That people are willing to do things, but they're confident level and that's actually gonna work, right? We invited a developer into our council meeting a couple of weeks ago to do some of these no garage workforce housing type thing, right? And all he wanted was the approval to do it. We wanted to kind of understand what his base, like the price point was. He couldn't tell us, right? He says, well, we'll have to see, right? And that's, my council's not gonna buy off on, well, we don't know what it's gonna be, because that's telling me it's gonna be a market price, right? Not an actual effort. So the developers need to understand that we might go fight to our membership all day long that this stuff works, but if our developers aren't seeing this and understanding, we've talked about those small lots that we've. Sorry, if Edge comes in and builds a $700,000 home on a 4,000 square foot lot, that's not helping the cause statewide that this is going to make a difference, right? They have to understand that they're maximizing their profit on that. That's great, but ruins the whole narrative that we're trying to get across, that small lots are solutions, and they need to be a player in this. They've got to be a player in this.
So I appreciate you bringing up that point about the developers. We had a meeting last week, land use task force meeting, where we did not present this data, but we presented the themes that we've been hearing from the members over and over and over again, and this was one of those themes. And Carson shared with the development community in that meeting the fact that we have more than 20 cities that had reported to us about density bonus programs that the cities currently have that are not being used. And then we asked the developers point blank, why aren't you using them? And it wasn't to be accusatory. It was to say, if Cameron City has this density bonus program that's trying to get to the outcome that we also want, but you're not using it, where's the disconnect? Is it on your end? Is it on our end? Are we requiring too much? Are you just not interested because the market forces? Where's the disconnect? And so they said they would take that question back in our next meeting, come prepared to answer it. In fact, one of them followed up with us afterwards, and I would love to get copies of them. And then I can go through it basically, because he doesn't, in his company's case, they're not in every city, right? And he said, I'd love to go through them, and then I can give you my analysis of would this work for my company or not? Because that disconnect is, I think, really at the core of all of this. So other questions from the
I was
group?
just gonna say, we can't make a developer develop. They get to come in and pick and choose and
you can throw it all on the table, but it's their decision at the end of the day.
Especially if you're not doing a development agreement, right? I mean, like if they're just meeting.
Right.
You're-
But
you're zoning-
Right, here's our zoning,
Yeah.
here's our zoning and our bonus, and they can go by right.
Okay, I think you're probably moving on to the detached.
Not yet,
ADU,
not yet.
no?
So I was gonna make just a couple of quick observations from us as staff, but we wanted to open it for your feedback before we give you our 2 cents of where we think this means as of now. And Carson, you're prepared to show the list of who's done? Okay, so you and Nick can pull up the list of the cities that have done the survey. This is the list of this is positive reinforcement for those of you who've done it, but if your name is not on that list, make sure your city fills it out
We're all
this week.
getting our phones.
Yeah, get your phone ready.
Here's a shame, okay.
It's not a shame, it's
Okay,
positive.
here's that.
reinforcement.
Okay.
Positive reinforcement.
For this.
Yeah.
You know, whichever one motivates you, Adam.
What?
So it's Nick will pull that up.
There it is.
Yeah, so this is the list. So these are the cities that have not filled out the LPC survey. Come on. Sorry.
Yeah, we just like this. Yeah, we just throw it right out to Dugan.
Yeah, I did that prescription. That's so relieved. I had to flip the script on it. So these are the cities that did it. Yeah, so you can see if your city is on there, you're good. If your city's not on there, we'll send a link to the board after. We'll be doing this all week. Make sure we get the feedback from communities.
Ongoing shaming.
So if you're up there, you did it and thank you.
And there were some cities who started and got maybe 1 or 2 fields in, but didn't finish. That was a bit longer too.
Yeah, okay. So a couple quick takeaways from the survey results for us as staff. Number one, I mentioned the centers piece that initially we were concerned about the center data, and then as we broke it down by classification of city, realized, I'll just use an example of, community that's out there right now. Beaver City did not prioritize Wasatch Choice Centers. That makes sense, right? Whereas a larger cities did. And I think this dovetails nicely in the conversation yesterday on the Transit Fresh Look is the communities that have transit are prioritizing center development. The cities that want transit or want to prioritize that center style development. So when we think about if there is going to be additional revenue from the state, in a tough budget year, like where do we prioritize that? And then what are the outcomes that come from it? Second interesting takeaway for us was there were several questions where we were trying to get to project approval. And a lot of communities came back and said, unlikely. And we think that there may have been a disconnect, again, in the framing of the question of like, well, we can't control that. So the garage piece that Mayor Palmer references is a perfect example. If a builder comes to you under SB 181 and says, I commit to do 80% AMI, then you can't require the garage. But there's nothing Harriman proactively does to zone for that. It's really an incentive to the developer to bring it to you. So a lot of cities who maybe said they were unlikely to implement it, it's because you don't have control of it. It's whether or not the builder brings it to you. So I think this whole idea of where the builders are pushing of like, hey, if you approve this project, we want to give you credit, figuring out what that looks like is an interesting question. Then the third piece, Nick, will you go down to the last page? The last page, we asked several questions around the permits.
The tables.
Of the tables, permanent supportive housing and missing middle. And the permanent supportive housing scored really low. The missing middle pieces scored much higher, especially compared to other things. And we have a missing middle toolkit that we helped develop with MAG and WFRC that'll debut officially at the conference tomorrow. Yeah, so Nick, keep going down to the. Yeah, keep going. So you can see like the permanent supportive housing didn't score very well, and a lot of that in the open-ended text responses, people said like, what does this have to do with MIHP? So I think people were focused on, we're talking about MIHP, this is outside of that focus, whereas we were trying to ask a question about the spectrum. So I think that's a question we'll just have to keep trying to answer over the next few months. And then you can see here in the missing middle type concepts, that the medium scores were much higher and the likelihood or already doing it questions were including townhomes. So interesting feedback here that we've told state leaders all along, there's interest from cities to do missing middle if builders will build it. And the feedback here shows that too.
And Cam, can I have one more thing? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Bill.
I was just gonna mention that these should also be viewed in the context of are you adopting the strategy, not necessarily, how likely are you to make this land use change? Right, so it's not saying how likely are you to zone for townhomes, it's how likely are you to choose townhomes as a strategy within MIHP 2.0. So that also nuances a little bit, I think, and helps explain, like, I don't think it's necessarily accurate to say just because the city said they were unlikely to zone for deeply affordable housing or for supportive housing in MIHP, that they would be opposed to the same degree if it was just a standalone land use application. So just one more layer to that.
So
Yeah, so the question, I think on the opposite side, what Jessica was talking about is like the why on the red. Why would you be unlikely, or why are you unlikely to not implement this thing? I was thinking on the opposite side, to the cities that have already implemented some of these, how successful have they been in moving the needle? Back to your question, we can have this zoning ordinance all we want, but if the developer doesn't build, we can't make him build. But how far is the needle moved by your action? I'll just go back to the example about the tap CDUs. We knew the needle wasn't going to move much, and it hasn't moved much. But how has it worked on the transportation corridor or the townhomes? I don't know. So do we have an answer, or is the answer we haven't implemented it and it hasn't been in effect for long enough? Because that could be true, right?
That's a lot of it. It's a lot of these came down quick and fast.
And
it takes years to get some, accurate feedback and
Yes.
statistics.
But is there any feedback, or is there any statistics that say, yes, this one worked?
Yeah.
This one shows no movement. This one actually shows movement.
And right now, I unfortunately have to say we don't have great data
Okay.
on that causation piece, but we're trying to figure out with MIHP 2.0, how do you build out the framework so you can get that causation answer?
Okay.
Even around the country, it's hard to answer. Forces are so unique, and there's so much that's outside of our control.
But one of the things that some of our key new leaders in the legislature said to us in that meeting, we need some time to see what some of all these things we've implemented, we need some time to see them percolate down and
That's
see what does work. So I think we have that argument.
Yep.
But that they made that argument to you.
Mhm.
I remember that day, because I was like, that's an excellent point.
And what did you say Speaker Schultz stated was their number one position this year?
Cost of living. And then he specifically started talking property tax as well as two other legislators. So we'll come to property tax here in a moment. Let me wrap this up in terms of our next steps. We're gonna do a little deeper dive tomorrow with our advisory group during the lunch hour. And then if we wanted you're the only ones who've seen this data thus far. We wanted you to have it in your minds for housing plan discussion tomorrow. And then we wanted to post survey results because I think the results will change as we get cities that haven't submitted this to submit. There is one specific item around detached ADUs. Nick, can you go up to page 1 of the table? And this is consistent with data that we've seen in what we've called right there. So allow for detached accessory dwelling units. Only 8% of the survey respondents currently don't do it and are unlikely to do it on their own. That's consistent with the data we've collected through MIHP reports. And then when we surveyed LPC about the draft that's in your packet, it came back quite positive of, as long as it's this framework, we could live with this going forward. We met with State Housing Fund folks last week. We expect one of the tactics is going to be state direction on detached ADUs. So we want to basically check back in with the board and say, you asked us in June, come up with some paths forward. We worked through several different options. What's in your board packet, we think has maybe an uncomfortable consensus within our membership, like this could work. Any final thoughts from the board as, because we've got meetings scheduled next week on these topics, any final thoughts on either detached ADUs specifically? Or what you've seen thus far, or any other questions you want us to try to answer from the membership over the next few weeks?
Do you want, oh, go ahead.
I had a question in the memo about detached ADU, rentals greater than 90 days.
Yes.
So I think what the aim with that proposal is to ensure that if a city does not want them used for Airbnbs,
That's correct.
that they can't be, or you decide you're okay with Airbnbs and then that they can be.
Yes.
The question was 90 days. So my understanding in the tax code was that it was rentals greater than 30 days. That's what triggered the difference in TRT. So why 90?
That was feedback from several folks in our resort caucus who felt like the 30-day was, too short, and you have a lot of document examples, Councilmember Hinton, down in your area of people who do the 30-day lease and then just break them after the 5-day vacation stay is over. So the thought was if you did 90 days, it could discourage that. And anything you want to add on?
That's part of it. I think Mayor Bruno of Springville's brought this up a number of times as well. That's a problem for them.
So is it going to be in conflict though with the sections in the state tax code that determine the transient room tax being tied to greater, to that 30-day break?
I would argue no, because the 30 days, if somebody is using it as vacation rental, that portion of the tax code would apply. In this case, it's like if we're required to have a detached ADU policy. And so therefore, they're going to be detached ADUs in a neighborhood. Maybe we didn't previously anticipate, but we will do it now. We don't want them to be short-term rentals, right? So now this gives you an additional enforcement tool to say you're using this as a short-term rental. We want this to be used for workforce housing.
30 days is all throughout the tax code as the distinction between rental property and primary residential property.
True.
I mean, it's not just one thing, it's all through it.
True, but this is not targeting the use for a short-term rental. It's trying to prevent the use of a short-term rental.
I understand. I just want you to know you can't change it in one place and not change the number of others.
So my concern mirrors Rogers, and I want cities to have all the flexibility to make sure they aren't used as short-term rentals, or that this is the only place you can use it as a short-term. My city only allows short-term rentals in, not a detached ADU, but in an ADU in general for the on-site purposes. And we enacted a TRT on purpose to make sure that those would, are with hotel properties, traditional hotel properties. So I just don't want us to inadvertently screw up the TRT and the tax code by the difference between 30 and 90 days. I understand the concern about doing a 31-day lease and then breaking it. And the impacts that has on communities that are trying to beat that, but it's got bigger ripples. So
That's a good point.
I think similar to this, the concern we've had, it almost simplifies to just strike that, right? Like it creates some confusion. We have some, our community with 7 on the DADU, which is about that the unit may not exceed the size of the primary unit unless the city ordinance allows the detached accessory dwelling unit to be larger. But then, we have a catch-all down at the bottom that the city ordinance reference can consider any other policy consideration the municipality sees fit. So for us in Mapleton, we have a lot of large homes. So when I read this, on one hand, under 7, we're like, oh crap. So you're saying we could have a 10,000 square foot primary unit and a 10,000 square foot. And there are some implications to parking and roads and all that. But so on one hand, it looks like it allows, not necessarily encourages, but allows the same size, which is contrary to our city policy. We have a percentage base, right? But then down at the bottom, we're saying, oh, but whatever the city says. So to me, there's a little bit of confusion in the language. I understand the intent isn't to preempt the city from saying it can be percentage based, but I don't think it's very clear. I think some people might use this language to harm the intent, even though the intent is actually to protect the city's right. So when we're looking at giant houses in our community and they're sitting on a, you know, half acre, acre, 2 acre lot where realistically it's not the end of the world, but are you gonna park a McMansion next to a McMansion because this says you can?
Sure.
Even though we can, because this you may, it's not mutually exclusive, but it's not very clear.
That's it, it's a good point, and the intent, just so everybody's clear on the overall framing here, based on all the feedback we've gotten this summer, was to have as little dictated in state code as possible, beyond you have to do it, right? And we refer to it as the stationary plan model, where Ogden City and Draper and Salt Lake, you have to do a stationary plan. You have to meet certain objectives, but the details are left up to Provo City Council to figure out what those details are. That's what we were trying to get to. But this proposal does not go far enough for a lot of folks at the Capitol because they want more standards dictated in code. And with specifically to the size piece, the idea was to say that if a city wants to allow a detached ADU to be larger than your primary unit, then the city can do that. The state default would be it can't be unless the city goes up, but then that's a ceiling, it's not the floor. So you could still in Mapleton say, the primary unit's 5,000 square feet. We're gonna have a 25% cap with the detached ADU can't be more than 25%. That would be allowable under what we've described here.
Yeah.
You're still allowing detached ADUs for reason.
I think it's just because it's, and I interpret it that way, but I think other people may look at that line 7 and then not see our right to have our own ordinances until later. And TBD on if that's actually the case. It's just the idea that someone might read 7 and be like, done, we're gonna do that.
You now have 9,999.
That's right.
This puts the onus on the city to figure those policies out. But again, a lot of our cities have already started figuring these policies out, and this is really getting to the handful of communities that aren't. They have an actor in this space. That's what we're trying to do, is say, nope, ultimately you need to act in this space. Any other final comments before we proceed, Marantowski?
Just some food for thought. Something I thought about after our legislative meeting that I should have jumped on in the moment is when Speaker Schultz talked about the cost of living. Another way to say that is it's less focused on housing costs and more focused on household costs. And that's the thing we've been pushing for a long, long time. So if that comes up in the conversations in the coming days, you might be opportunity, at least on the house side, to pivot that direction.
That's a great point, and Councilor Dugan's ready to jump out of his seat because
As long as like affordable living and affordable housing.
Right.
Affordable living.
There's a lot more that's going on, because he talked about fuel costs a lot. They talked a lot about energy. Talked about that, that mean, they always talk about transportation, about utility fees, et cetera. Those are things we have a lot more control over. Taxes is the number, that's a huge one. And it's really focused on schools, which we'll get to largely. So I think we have some areas for where we can say that we are a big part of the solution in the household costs realm, just strategically.
That's an excellent point. Excellent points. Any other final comments? Does our plan and staff is to proceed on this path of detached ADUs? Finish building out the survey results here and then build out the 2.0, based in large part, not exclusively, but in large part on these survey results. So any other final comments on either of these two pieces?
And this is probably, I could ask it quietly because there's only like 3 of us, but for those of us that are carved out for universities.
So that would not?
This wouldn't affect them.
Yeah, because that's the internal, we as staff, based on the feedback we got from folks, decided not to go down the path of internal ADUs in that framework. And in this case, it's, no, you have to have your own ordinance. And then you determine the scope of that ordinance. So there would not be any language similar to internal ADUs about ADUs only in a portion of your city. It's based, the language we have right now is based on lot size, but that lot size will play. Now, I will also point out that when we presented this concept last week for feedback to Property Rights Coalition, Land Use Task Force, and State Housing Plan folks, they actually pushed back on the lot size piece and said, what if instead of having the lot size, just simply said, if it fits with your setbacks. So in other words, and I'll use Salt Lake City as an example, Salt Lake City doesn't have a minimum lot size. It just says like, this is the building footprint. So if you have a small lot, but you have a small house on the small lot, you could fit a detached ADU on the small lot. Whereas if you have, use the small lot example Mayor Palmer said a second ago, big house on a small lot. Well, it's not gonna fit. So they said, what if it focused more on the footprint rather than the lot size? And we said, right now, our conversation has always has been on the lot size, but we're waiting for them to come back with another proposal. So unfortunately, this won't be the last time we talk about this, but we just wanted to check back in today.
And keep in mind, when the developers of what they're building is big houses on small lots. I mean, let's be clear. I mean, you can make the small lot all you want. I've got it in my community, and they're just building this big a house and they can physically build them.
Yep, that's right. Which then, as Verpar said earlier, undermines the credibility of the whole conversation.
That's what they're doing. I mean, there's nobody doing anything different than I'm aware of. Maybe they're not, but I'm.
Okay, any other final feedback on these two topics before we commit to property tax? Okay, we're not looking for a motion. We wanted to have the open discussion over the next couple of days. If other things come to mind, let us know. And if your city was not on the list earlier, please make sure you fill out the survey. We'll send a follow-up email, Nick, right after board meeting with that. So you can circulate it, you can fill it out yourself and or circulate it to the right people in the city. Let's talk property tax. We still have a little over 20 minutes here. There are a handful of cities around the state, more than 20, that we don't have the final number yet. Met with the tax commission for 90 minutes yesterday, working through it. And you have in your packet our most updated information with caveat that Ivans is no longer non-compliant. They are now compliant as districts. So like I didn't have a chance to tell you that, but the tax commission told me that yesterday at my meeting with them. So approximately 20 cities, including several cities in this meeting, went through the truth in taxation process, made a mistake somewhere in the process, and did not get their property tax rate certified. Okay, so Nick, go down to the table. This is the list of the cities. Once we learned about this, we followed up, and I say we, it was Alexa and Carson and others, followed up with every city that went through truth in taxation this year to figure out where are you in the spectrum here. And then we built our own list, and then we're waiting for the official list from the tax commission. This was us building our list, and then the red points there are where cities got tripped up. The two primary reasons where they got tripped up are first around the biggest one here is around what's known as the consolidated list of the other taxing entities that were going through truth in taxation that had to be presented. The term presented was undefined. That caused a lot of problems.
Now that list is just alphabetical. You're not pointing out top four worst on there.
Top four you can find, not five.
We're all cities starting with D.
Yeah.
I just want to pick one seven.
Alphabetical is you weren't like trying to single out.
Nope.
Okay.
Nope, and then the second most common was the sequencing in your meeting of having a standalone here. The biggest dollar amounts were from several school districts. Alpine School District, Granite School District, Provo School District, Tooele School District. They had some significant dollar amounts of a property tax increase that is not going forward. We have chatted with legislative leadership, and I'd say there's sympathy that so many communities got tripped up. There was no appetite to try to fix this in special session, and just think through the politics of that for a moment, okay? The legislature a year ago, almost to the date, tried to have Amendment A and Amendment D on the ballot, and the court said no, because the legislature missed a noticing requirement. So here we are a year later saying, we want to do this tax increase, and we missed a noticing requirement. Will you fix the law right now so we can do that tax increase? Okay, so you see the politics. And then from a policy perspective, there is an acknowledgement that there's some clunkiness in the code. That's become my new favorite word in this topic over the last couple weeks. And I think there's a unique opportunity right now with the clunkiness that several legislators have approached us and said, we'd like to try to make the truth in taxation process still difficult, but more user-friendly, and address some of the clunkiness that tripped up some communities this year. That's the glass half full. Glass half empty, as you have several legislators who are thrilled that this happened and felt like they want to make property tax harder to raise. This bill or this outcome shows it. And there's serious discussion about scrapping truth in taxation altogether and just having property tax caps so that you can't raise property tax more than X% each year. So South Dakota just did this a few months ago, South Dakota legislature. You can only, in South Dakota going forward, raise property tax up to 3% each year. And that's all. So there would be no truth in taxation process. But that means if you need to do something big in investment in your community, you'd lose that tool.
But you'll do it every year.
Well, that's, yeah, you do the
Every single
yeah,
year.
you do the 3%
Right.
every year, right? Like that would be the interesting study in South Dakota is if communities take that approach. Wyoming has done some draconian stuff around property tax this year. And then, of course, you've got some historical ones like California. Roger?
Just a couple of things. One, we had a lot of cities that did it right and didn't have problems too.
That's true.
Bear in mind, there is some clunkiness in the system, and part of it was an enhanced enforcement this year that hadn't been in the past. And the other is, you don't do truth and taxation every year, therefore it's a new experience if you haven't done it 4 or 5 years. That explains part of it. But I want to emphasize one thing. Truth and taxation started 40 years ago this year, 1985. I was there at the beginning on this. I promise you, for all the frustrations and everything we have in truth and taxation, we have a workable system. It also preserves the autonomy of local governments to make the final decision. That is missing in virtually every other system. I promise you, I can come up with, and the legislature will come up with, if we radically change truth and taxation, it will not be pretty. We will lose an awful lot if that changes. So be careful what we ask for.
Yeah, that's a great framing point, Roger. And I'll just add the last piece of context here that referenced in the memo. The Legislative Auditor's Office is releasing an audit this month, well, in October, about the truth and taxation process. So there's a lot of attention at the Capitol right now with truth and taxation. And we felt like it was in our best interest as cities generally to have the individual cities try to make their cases and bring additional information. And several have gone from non-certified to certified. And then recognize that there was not an appetite for a special session next week to address this. So basically acknowledge like these things happened, it sucks, but these things happen. Let's use this as a reason of a conversation around the clunkiness of truth and taxation, while at the same time playing defense to not lose our authority that we currently have with truth and taxation and property tax.
But as going forward, I hope as a body, we can get behind the concept of if they're gonna have a notice to let you know you didn't comply, that it is in a relevant time frame so that you could remedy it. So an actual notice that's valuable and a remedy process so that, because none of us are doing this to take trips to France. We're doing it to make sure there's a cop and a firefighter and a pothole, so it's gonna hurt the communities that, like I say, and if you're gonna have a requirement that we have to tell you about everybody else's tax increases when they're having their own truth and taxation hearings, and that's a deal killer, well, I guess that's fine, but at least we ought to have a notice period that gives us the ability to say, hey, you didn't meet it, and a checklist that includes that item, because the tax commission's checklist did not include that last item. No excuse, there's a statute, I get it, I took my lumps, but I'm just saying that I think we could make the process, not necessarily easier, but more valuable to the taxpayer, because my community didn't come out and complain about having more police officers and firefighters. This money we were gonna use it, we were gonna buy a fire truck with it. So my community was like, yeah, okay, but now, so I think we just gotta keep that tone.
The real frustration to add to this process that we're talking about right here, this is not the primary notification process. If this was all repealed, it would not change anything on notification. The primary notification is the notice that goes out in the mail to every homeowner on the 15th of July.
That's right. But Mayor Walker's highlighted some of the clunkiness that I think there may be an opportunity to improve and make it more user friendly for the taxpayer, the taxing entity, and all stakeholders. The trick will be to not let this turn into a reason to erode our property tax authority altogether. So let's go, Councilor Dugan, then Director Christie.
So maybe I'm a slow reader here. So we have 12 lines on your property tax bill. Are they gonna limit each line? So the school district, the water districts, the mosquito abatement district, everybody on that line, or just the Salt Lake City, the city property tax?
So as of this moment, there is not legislation in Utah around caps. There's a lot.
And it will be terrible. We experienced it once.
Yeah, so I expect legislation in this space. So what we'd like to do at LPC in October is put together an LPC work group that includes finance people, elected officials, and just basically walk through the statute and say which clunkiness areas would we like to improve, and then have some of these other conversations to bring back some recommendations. We have some legislators who really want to fix the clunkiness, some that want to do caps, and a lot of the frustration, and this came up at the Ogden meeting last week too, a lot of the frustrations targeted school districts because the school district property tax increases the last 2 years have been much higher than anybody else's, and it's a bigger dollar amount. America Frizzy?
So back to eroding our control, because I always feel like that's our battle line we're fighting every single session. When they talked about a potential automatic 3% tax increase going forward, is that 3% on every entity? Or is that just, because then you're jumping, like, that's significant. tax
That has the
increase.
same problems with caps.
Yeah. Yeah, the South Dakota put these caps in this year. So they have not gone through a budget year yet. Seeing which communities and which taxing entities do it. I also don't know how many taxing entities there are in South Dakota compared to here, right? Or even how cities compare to the overall property tax bill in South Dakota.
I mean, all of that.
Right, well, but this is why we're bringing it up, like, normally you would say, okay, 20-ish cities made a mistake, that's a bummer for them. But as soon as this happened, we realized this is gonna be part of the bigger property tax conversation, that's a huge issue for us. Which is why we wanted to make sure you had the situational awareness, and we have some cities on this list who are mad at us for not, in their minds, advocating harder for special session inclusion next week. Again, I can tell you right now, we've talked to a lot of our friends at the Capitol who all said, we're sympathetic. We're willing to talk about it in January. We're not willing to talk about it in October.
Well, nobody's winning because they're still gonna, now next year.
Next year,
They're gonna be double as high for these communities.
potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, and again, this is just the city piece. All told, of the 81 entities that went through truth and taxation, 60% are not in compliance for a variety of reasons. We're the only ones who've done this analysis. The school districts haven't done this yet, and the special districts haven't done this yet. And then I met 90 minutes with tax commission yesterday going through all of this as well. We basically went line by line through the code of a variety of other pieces. So this is gonna be a big one for us.
Have you shared this awesome matrix that you guys have made of the different components of the code section? So that, because it would be fascinating to know of the county school districts and other special service districts. If the fifth column that is mostly red, if that is overwhelmingly the one, I think Senator Wilson would probably have some sympathy of saying, look, the way I've constructed this requirement is.
The fifth item was the one not on the checklist.
Yeah.
It's akin to not having the landing gear down on your light point landing approach.
Not on the Salt Lake County auditor checklist or not on.
Tax commission.
Yeah, so this is actually an interesting piece too. There are multiple checklists. I just gathered some of them. Mayor Walker's right, the tax commission checklist didn't include that. Some of the counties did, some of them didn't. So there's not really one checklist to rule them all. Now, a checklist is not the code, right? But
it could be.
But if people act in reliance on it, it leads to some unfortunate circumstances. So I gave a copy of this to the tax commission yesterday. And not to the commissioners because they're still weighing whether there's any sort of appeal rights of this. We shared this with their staff as a resource for them. And then we will be following up the school districts and special districts. The counties will go through truth and taxation later this calendar year. We'll share this with them as well, so they avoid those mistakes. Because I know Salt Lake County's planning on a property tax increase and so there will be some counties will go through
The
this.
tax commission went to the trouble of creating the checklist. I mean, I take it back to being in the cockpit. You should put the wheels down every time before you land, but I'm telling you, if it's not on the checklist, there's pilots that have done it and there's ones that will. And there's even ones that'll do that with it on the checklist. But if you're gonna have a checklist, it ought to have every damn thing on it. Whereas a useless checklist.
Well, interestingly, the tax commission actually had two checklists. They had the simple checklist and the in-depth checklist. It's on the in-depth one. It was not in this. And that's where
Why we have two checklists?
That's even worse.
Yeah.
One pilot's got the other checklist, the one's got the other one, and then someone's gonna leave the gear up.
And it's why, to the credit of the tax commission, they have been trying to work through this with each individual city and so like, show us, like, here's what we found in our audit, show us if you've done these other pieces. And several communities have been able to move from one side of the ledger to the other because they brought that additional.
And I used that example, but no one ran it, so I.
Intermediate, yeah.
Yeah, if you want to bring up the appeals piece.
Yeah, so the appeal piece, there is no formal appeals process for a taxing entity. And that's another, I think, clunky aspect that we could try to address in statute. And the tax commission held a hearing last week where they basically said we don't have an appeal process unless somebody can prove to us that we should under the jurisprudence we have today. But as of yesterday, there was no update about whether or not they've made a decision there. But that's, again, a piece of clunkiness in the code.
But there's also a hard deadline, the counties that gotta print the notices.
Yep, and that's happening in the next few days, which makes a special session impractical. Even if the politics were there, it'd be unlikely to meet those deadlines with a special session next week.
So for those cities who are on the list, maybe frustrated about the advocacy or just the action in general, one of the things I would note from the conversation, some of which I had with Cameron and some of which I had on my own with members of the tax commission, they sit in a court-like setting, and they are keenly aware of how the legislature feels about the court system right now. And the tax commission chair gave an interesting presentation a year and a half ago about his overarching concerns about the proliferation of instance, lids, whatever other alphabet soup, and from a policy perspective and a tax perspective, and was reined in pretty hard for doing that. And so their heads are down. If they do not think they have statutory authority, they are hesitant to do that and stick their neck out, even though I think there's probably some personal agreement that cities and other school districts and counties substantially met the requirement. You did the painful part.
Yeah.
You did the worst painful part of the process. And sitting there and being yelled at by the public, and the public was aware these ticky-tacky things, but they don't think they have any latitude. And they're not gonna be brave on that point.
There was a statutory change that went to shall, right? It was actually, they didn't even just think, they got told.
Yeah, you don't have
You
to.
shall follow the checklist. Well, no, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And there's one more piece to that, Cameron mentioned this, and I just want to make sure everybody heard it. There is a legislative audit going on right now around truth in taxation. We don't know what the contents of that audit will be yet. It has not been released yet. But the tax commission has certainly been involved with that. So we don't know what that's going to say or what that's going to look like, but there are several pressures coming from different angles on the tax commission that makes them very hesitant to do anything that is outside of the very explicit parameters of the law.
The second issue that involves the tax commission that also is important for everybody to be aware of is we have 9 communities. That number was a bigger number before the tax commission notified us, and then we followed up with communities and been able to shrink this list. But we have 9 communities who have been imposing RAP or ZAP taxes without proper authorization. And I should make sure we're crystal clear on what I mean by that. They were authorized correctly in the first place, but they didn't miss their 10-year renewal. In the memo, Roger pointed out what the liability is based on 2023. And Roger, just yesterday, I got the updated numbers and where some communities have missed their reauthorization, because we were operating on the premise that most of them missed their reauthorization in 2023. We've since confirmed several of them missed their reauthorization actually in 2016. So they're only liable.
Yeah, they're out of.
Yeah, they're only liable on the statute of limitations for someone to sue for a sales tax refund for 3 years. But some of them have been out of compliance for 9 years.
It's frustrating. Well, these are small cities, I understand that, but they were able to get the first one done correctly.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the hard one. And and no city's ever lost a reauthorization election. So it's very frustrating. You did the first one right, and then everything fell apart after that.
Correct. Now, what does this mean for all of us organizationally? One, to the credit of the tax commission, the tax commission's been very transparent and responsive, and they've said, look, if these cities put it on the ballot in November, then we'll treat that as the reauthorization. 8 of the 9 were able to do that. So one of them, it'll just expire tomorrow, actually. The other 8 will have it on the ballot this November. Now, under current law, those 9 communities are liable for resident or a taxpayer to request a sales tax refund for the last 3 years. Okay. Well, legislators and the Taxpayers Commission were very concerned about the precedent of a community having a tax that was not reauthorized correctly, being able to put it on the ballot and not having any sort of additional consequence to that community. So after the committee hearing, we chatted with the co-chairs and a few others, say, okay, what could those consequences look like? We've met with all 9 of those communities, and we're bringing it back to you because this idea of like consequences for cities, like that's bigger than just the 9. Like we have to think through precedent, but we also have to think through the precedent on the other side of taxpayer dollars or sacred dollars. And if we make a mistake in the authorization of those tax dollars, we need to be fair to the taxpayer, right? So in our conversations with those 9 communities, what we've discussed, Nick, slide it up to the ABC. Okay, so these are the 5 options that we've discussed with them, requiring them to hold some additional public hearings, having the state withhold the equivalent amount of sales or motor fuel tax from those communities, requiring another election to retroactively approve the taxes, making those 9 cities and towns ineligible for state outdoor rec grant money, or reducing the number of years that the 2025 reauthorization provides. So coming back in statute in January and saying you don't get a full 10-year runway with this new reauthorization, you get 8 if you missed it in 2023, or you only get 1 if you missed it from 2016. So as we presented it to these 9 communities, they were most comfortable with A, D, and E. And they were concerned, and we share the concern as staff with the precedent of B and C. So what we wanted to just check in with you, there are a couple of communities who are board members that are part of this group of 9. But we wanted to check back with you, big picture, city-wise, to basically gauge your comfort level with us proceeding with A, D, and E, because the legislature is expecting us to come back with some ideas by the October Revenue and Taxation Interim Committee.
If I could just add to that, so additional public hearings, that is not something they would need any kind of legislative approval to do. Several of the municipalities have already held some kind of public hearing explaining this. We gave them some component pieces we thought they should have. One, I mean, just own up to it, this is what happened. One, explain what you've been doing with the funds, so that, so they, had you reauthorized it, we would have been using them correctly anyway. And then C, explaining how somebody could get a refund individually if they desired that. And pretty much, I think all of the communities agreed to do that. So they're all planning to do that. Strategically, that is something we can do without the legislature. And in fact, we can go back to the legislature and say, we're already out in front of us, this is what we're doing with it. So A, we don't need any legislative authority for, D and E is something else we have to have some kind of legislation about, just putting some context around that.
Then the last paragraph, references our presidential concerns, but there's also a piece here where the state code is unclear around notification between the cities that do these taxes and the tax commission, and who's responsible for what piece of the notification. So I feel like that's something proactively we could do to clean this up so this never happens again. Am I right?
Yeah. You're correct. Although, again, I have to say, you did it right the first time. The problem of not institutionalizing that process, and when people change somewhere saying, 10 years from now, we've got to have a tickler file that goes off and says, we have to do this and this again.
Yeah,
because the tax commission this is not like reauthorizing your car. They're not keeping stuff and sending out, here's your notice a year from now, you've got to do this and this and this. So maybe they should, but that's never been their role.
Yeah, great point, Roger. Am I right?
Yeah, just a comment on having to pay it back. Several years ago, fortunately, it was before my time, the state tax commission incorrectly paid sales tax to Torrey for the resorts that are outside of Torrey city limits. And Torrey ended up having to write a check for $70,000. And that really hurt Torrey in those days. And this idea that the small towns, the ones like Salina and Gunnison, I'm looking at that they can easily come up with 134,000 or 80,000 is not right. It's hard to do.
Yeah, great point, Mayor Seth, your hands up.
Yeah, this is a tough one, and because the impacts, the state tax commission. I think the point you said a moment ago, Cameron, is really important because in addition to me, for example, if my city was on that list, in addition to me not doing it, the tax commission didn't stop. And so there has to be something like they should have some mechanism too that says after 10 years they automatically stop, but for. And it would really be nice if there was a check, if there was a belt and a suspender, that said the tax commission will send out a reminder, especially to these small towns. I mean, my comment in the text thread is that's a real plea, I think, for those smaller towns that have such high turnover in their staff and in their elected officials. And so if there was some kind of a reminder that the tax commission could send out, that could be helpful. I can imagine the state's position might be, hey, we're not going to do anything to help you collect more taxes. And I can understand that. But my guess is that every town can point to some really amazing things that we've done with these RAP taxes that our communities love. So I'd love to overcome maybe this hurdle of gotcha approach. It feels like is being taken right now. With the tax commission.
I don't think the tax commission did that. They were apprised of the situation, and then when they got it, they had to do something. Frankly, they're being fairly generous in allowing the election in 2025 to act as a clean up the mess situation. So I say that, Seth, in that regard, that in most instances, they're allowing it out here. Bear in mind, there is nothing that says those cities have to refund all that money. That's the difference between the Torrey situation, where it was a misdistribution, money that should have gone to somewhere else with the Torrey. Whether they'll end up ever having to pay that amount of money back depends on individuals making a refund claim. I think that's really unlikely to be very many.
And thank you, Roger. With the RAP tax there, it's not a gotcha. With the I'm probably blending the property tax thing a little bit. But with the RAP tax, the experience is overwhelming that I think when they pass high.
Oh yeah.
When they're reauthorized every time. I think it's like you said, and we've seen around, it's 100%. And so this is what I'm a lot more comfortable with than obviously a property tax. But anyways, if we can make some changes, I think giving the tax commission some direction as well to send out a notice in year 9, hey, you're up for reauthorization in the next year. I think that could be really helpful, especially for smaller towns.
Great.
Yeah. Well, it's our plan of attack based on the comments with the 9, and just wanted to check in with this group because we've got to go back to October interim with the response, is to pursue options in the AD&E space. So speak now or hold your peace. Okay, we'll proceed with the AD&E space, and we're past time. I'm going to ask for 4 more minutes. Transportation utility fee. The league officers, Justin and I had a terrific pair of meetings now with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Utah State Senate, and Representative Karen Peterson. We are at the point now where we're exchanging drafts, but have general agreement on concepts. And the general agreement on concepts is very similar to what this board approved, which is first everybody pays the fee. The fee is based on, in statute, methodology around traffic counts, trip generation and the like, and cannot be based on any of the characteristics that drive property tax, so property valuation, et cetera. Have an appeal process. We had a pretty solid discussion about whether or not to count Sundays. That piece is still up in the air. But nevertheless, the core concepts that we discussed in this board meeting a few weeks ago is what's reflected in the drafts that are going back and forth right now. So that's the quick update back there.
How many of the players the Sunday gonna be?
It wasn't so much, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was objecting to Sunday. It was, they were worried about the call out for, say, other denominations that meet on Saturday. And wanting to, they're always very sensitive about something that reflects on them. We pointed out there's lots of things where Saturday really matters. A Costco, which I think is a degree of hell, Costco on a Saturday. So I thought drafting staff for Ledge Research had a good idea about kind of reversing the descriptor, because that Saturday count is really important. And if you were a religious denomination that had a Saturday key meeting date, the data would likely bear that out, but that's just not a factor.
Yeah.
You could also have private businesses where the only day they're open is the Sunday.
So we're waiting on Ledge Research, who's starting to draft. I've got some things I've got to follow up on, but we've made really good progress consistent with the principles that you laid out as a board a few weeks ago. Justin, anything you want to bring up DEQ water fee and special session wise?
DEQ water fee, we expect to see some changes to that one. I know many of your municipalities put in some updates on that one. Don't know what the changes are going to be yet, but the input, they indicated they are going to make some changes there. Special session, there's going to be one. I think that's all anybody really knows right now. Redistricting is going to be involved.
Sorry, so you're indicating that you think water fee is a special session item? Or
No, I don't think DEQ, no, sorry, yeah, two separate things. DEQ water fee, very good. Moving on, special session, there's going to be one. It's anybody's guess other than redistricting what else place shows up with there. Yeah.
Angie Emmys.
But it's pretty much, it is confirmed at this point that it will be next Monday, the 6th, probably starting in the morning.
I was just gonna say that the whole transportation utility fee discussion, it was interesting that I think that at least for a while, the church was over here on we don't want our property tax. You can understand that issue. But as soon as we sort of distilled it down, good work by Cameron and Justin, and that we're talking about trip counts of vehicles, the church was like, well, okay, we can get our heads around that. It was just interesting how it kind of
Just add it to their tithing. Oh, sorry.
well, that didn't come up, but no, they understood the concept of road use, like trip counts on things. So it was just interesting to see how it seemed like it was what we were talking about was making sense for a while, but just, how politics goes, it takes a while sometimes for both sides to get around what we're talking about. So anyway, I thought it was awesome how it worked out.
Yeah, me too. And to their credit, they came to the table in good faith.
They did.
Everybody did, and
Good.
we were able to talk to each other in a way that hasn't happened in the past. Okay, we're past time. The executive director report, there are just two things. Number one, three things. Strategic objectives. They've been in your packet for the last few months. And we were gonna ask you to approve them. We went through them as a board in the spring and we'd wordsmith a few things. So if you're comfortable approving them, they've been in the packet the last 3 times, I think. If you're comfortable, let's approve so we can move on to the next piece of what we need to do with creating a mission statement and vision for future meetings.
I move that we approve them.
Motion by Mayor Shepherd, second by Councilmember Dugan. Is there any further discussion on that item? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes unanimously, none opposed.
Perfect.
And that takes us.
Nick, nominations, Nick. I'll just give a shout out for nominations committee.
The nominations committee will be meeting tomorrow to discuss the interviews that they've gone through. This will be their 3rd meeting. They've dedicated a whole lot of time, including 3 hours of virtual interviews, which in dog years is like I don't know, 5 days worth of sitting down. So thank you very much, Councilmember Hinton chairing the committee. We also have Councilmember Winch serving on the committee, Councilmember Hedgeland online. And a whole bunch of folks that are in this room and online went through that process as well this week. So they will meet to deliberate and vote. We will announce the results at the Thursday business session. And Councilmember Hinton will be notifying folks after we vote whether they've made it or not. So it will not be a surprise to anyone when the name is up on the board. But thank you all so much for throwing your hat in the ring, for serving on the committee and everything. It's been a good process so far.
I think.
Echo that, for thank you to everyone who's been on the committee and who's also interviewed, and that takes a lot to do. And also thank you to staff very much, Nick and Alexa, for making this smooth process and keeping us on track and in line, and you did great. Despite my
Alexa's
attempts
first
to
year helping out with it, and she did an awesome job. Helped me out a ton.
More than 3 times the number of applicants that we have spots for, so it's a good problem to have, but it's a tough problem to have, so thank you for your service there. And then we need to present the board meeting schedule. Monday, October 27th will be the new board, but we wanted to calendar these, and this will be officially approved by the next board, but our recommendation is splitting up LPC and the board in October after conversations with soon-to-be President Bradshaw. So Monday, October 27th, that meeting would be at 9:30 a.m. And then we'd have no meeting in November, meeting in December. Then it would be a lunch meeting. So we can have a holiday lunch as we approve the audit.
So
And
that is, just so you're aware, that is a change. Your agenda says December 15th, 9:30 a.m. And the calendar invites will go as soon as we have our official new board go to everyone. So you'll see those come through on Thursday, but just know that is the one change, so.
Sorry, wait, on Monday, the 15th. I thought we were going with the morning.
I thought we can do the morning. I thought that was the one we wanted to keep October in the morning and switch December to noon. But we can keep it at 9:30 for sure.
Multiple.
so we'll take a motion just to adopt the October 27th.
You're right, Nick. Perfect. I am wrong.
So we do need a motion so we can set the October 27th meeting for the next board.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes.
Great, and then just on a fun and positive note, the Monday, March 23rd board meeting, I will likely not be in attendance for that meeting because my wife is due with a baby boy on March 21st. So so that's the positive news to end the meeting.
She's
Hard to
such a
beat that
positive
news.
UA grad.
I'm excited that you guys have finally figured out timing.
I didn't know if the yes, it's 2 weeks after the sessions. I told her she can't come around.
Oh, well, maybe it's not that good a news just yet. I have, any other business anyone else has? All right, is there a motion to adjourn? Second. All right, all in favor of adjourn, say aye.
Aye.
All right.
And then we'll see you tomorrow morning at the Salt Palace.
Bright early.
9 a.m. is the general session, breakfast before, all day tomorrow, all day Thursday. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.